Hello everyone, welcome to Original Wandon TV. Today, I am bringing you the latest international headlines. 1. Burkina Faso cuts diplomatic relations with France, marking another major shift in the relationship between the two countries. 2. A small aircraft crashed shortly after takeoff, resulting in multiple deaths and prompting an investigation by authorities. 3. Rescuers pulled survivors from earthquake rubble after 4 days.
Rescue efforts are being expanded in Venezuela as foreign teams rush in to help quake victims.
Offering a rare story of hope amid a devastating disaster.
Welcome to Original Wandon TV. Original Wandon TV. The voice you trust, the stories you love. Inspiration, information, entertainment. Subscribe now and never miss a story. Original Wandon TV. But every story inspires.
Burkina Faso says it's cutting diplomatic ties with France, prompting the French Foreign Ministry to say it may take reciprocal measures. Gilbert Ouedraogo, the communications minister of the West African nation, announced the decision on national television on Friday. He said it was made as the conditions for mutual respect, reciprocal trust, and non-interference in internal affairs were no longer in place. The move widens a rupture with its former colonial ruler after years of worsening ties over security, sovereignty, and alleged foreign interference. In a statement on Saturday, the French Foreign Ministry said the country, quote, regrets this hostile and unfounded decision. It urged French nationals in Burkina Faso to exercise heightened vigilance. The West African country has been battling an Islamist insurgency that has spread from Mali and killed thousands and displaced millions in the region over the past decade.
A helicopter belonging to Saudi oil giant Aramco crashed Sunday on the country's east coast, killing 14 nationals. That's according to a state news agency. A flight tracking app shows the helicopter making a sharp turn before its signal was lost. Media reports say the cause of the incident is unknown and is being investigated. Aramco resumed oil loadings at its Ras Tanura terminal in the Gulf on Friday after 4 months of disruption due to the conflict in the Middle East. It didn't immediately respond to a request for comment on the incident, which reportedly happened in the early morning. Saudi Arabia, the world's biggest oil exporter, has joined a rush to move cargoes amid hopes of a sustained peace deal between the US and Iran.
I haven't been listening to what Vučić says for a long time now. It has long since become irrelevant. I stick to the fact that he is an incompetent institution. It is yet another play, another way of drawing attention to himself.
I think that his resignation will not change anything unless the government and the entire political scene, which has lasted for over 30 years in our country, change.
Roman ruins that endured for 2,000 years in the Lebanese port city of Tyre were damaged by Israeli airstrikes on the UNESCO-listed World Heritage Site. This crown, known as a capital, was blown off the top of an ancient column. Adnan Istanbuli is with Lebanon's Directorate General of Antiquities. He said the strike damaged a 2,000-year-old mosaic from the Roman era, saying it looked like it had been hit by an earthquake. Israeli troops invaded Lebanon in March after Hezbollah fighters opened fire on Israeli targets, and the conflict has not spared Lebanon's ancient sites. Israeli strikes pummeled the Mamluk-era market in the city of Nabatea, and troops razed centuries-old Lebanese border towns. Israeli forces in May seized Beaufort Castle, a Crusader fortress. Israel has accused Hezbollah of placing weapons in the site, a claim that Lebanese authorities deny. In response to questions from Reuters, Israel's military says it does not aim to, quote, cause excessive damage to civilian infrastructure and strikes only out of military necessity. It said it took into account the existence of, quote, sensitive sites and applied, quote, a rigorous approval process as required. Ghassan Salameh is Lebanon's culture minister. He said the Israeli attacks have damaged his nation's heritage.
Heritage is not only Roman and Phoenician antiquities. Heritage is also historic buildings, archaeological sites, and buildings with a cultural function. And here the destruction is extensive to a large degree, especially for the approximately 60 villages that have been completely bulldozed.
Despite a ceasefire that took hold a week ago, Salameh said authorities have yet to build a full picture of the damage. Israeli troops still occupy what Israel describes as a security zone more than 6 miles deep into Lebanon that it says is off-limits to Lebanese.
Previously, there were destroyed buildings, destroyed apartments, school buildings, and so on. Destroyed. This time, there is some...
Back.
11 people died when a small plane crashed in the northeastern French town of Tomblaine on Sunday, narrowly missing nearby homes. Local officials and a witness say the dead included a pilot and 10 parachutists. The aircraft was used by a parachuting school and went down shortly after takeoff, according to officials, who say it was carrying 5 trainee parachutists and 5 instructors. French media reported the trainees were a group of nurses. The plane came down in a residential area near a shopping center. The wreckage of the aircraft is strewn across a bike path. A witness who declined to be identified described the moment of the crash and its aftermath.
When we saw it climbing, its nose was really pointed upwards, and then suddenly, silence. With the windows open, since it's so hot, there was no more noise, and all at once it veered off to the right. Because there's an embankment on the other side by the road, we couldn't see what happened. I didn't see the crash, I just heard the sound. We saw right away that it was over, that they had all died instantly. There was no movement, and it was clear the impact had been too violent for there to be any survivors.
People at the scene tried to douse the flames with fire extinguishers to keep the aircraft from catching fire. France's interior minister visited the site hours after the crash, where he said the plane plummeted shortly after takeoff, crashing about 1,000 feet from the end of the runway of Nancy-Essy Airport from where it departed. He also said some of the families of those killed were at the airport and witnessed the crash themselves. Media reports said the plane was registered in Germany. Germany's foreign ministry did not immediately comment. It was not immediately clear.
Fire and further threats over the weekend in the most significant escalation since both sides agreed to a 14-point memorandum aimed at ending the armed conflict. Photographs released by Bahrain's police were said to show damage to a residential building hit by an Iranian drone. A U.S. official confirmed Iranian attacks on U.S. facilities and told Reuters there were no reported U.S. casualties or major damage to U.S. sites. U.S. President Donald Trump wrote on social media that, quote, "There may come a point when we are no longer able to be reasonable and will be forced to militarily complete the job that we very successfully started. If that happens," he wrote, "the Islamic Republic of Iran will no longer exist." The conflict began when the U.S. and Israel jointly attacked Iran at the end of February. Iran responded by firing drones and rockets at Israel and at Gulf nations hosting American military bases. And Iran effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most important energy shipping route, for most of the last 4 months. An interim agreement signed earlier in June was meant to reopen the strait and move both sides toward negotiations on Iran's nuclear program, while Washington waived sanctions on Tehran. But fighting has since resumed and intensified. U.S. Central Command said earlier that its forces had carried out fresh strikes after a Panama-flagged tanker was attacked by an Iranian drone on Saturday. Iran's state-run Press TV reported the IRGC said U.S. strikes had violated the ceasefire and, quote, "will result in the complete halt of all diplomatic processes." Trump has repeatedly declared Iran has agreed or will agree to concessions on its nuclear program, only to have Tehran deny them. And Tehran has insisted it would have a role in governing traffic through Hormuz, which Trump has said remained open to shipping.
Rescue efforts are being expanded in Venezuela as foreign teams rush in to help quake victims. The death toll has surged, but 4 days on from the powerful double tremors, there is still hope of finding more people alive. Family members and volunteers have spent days pulling survivors out of the rubble in La Guaira and Caracas. But as this woman says, some areas don't have the heavy machinery needed to move the rubble out of the way. Following on from the 7.2 and 7.5 magnitude earthquakes, many families are now on the street. UNICEF estimates 3.9 million children were living in the areas hit by the double quakes. The government says hundreds of people are still missing or trapped, but more than 55,000 people are listed as unaccounted for on a website promoted by the country's opposition. The US Geological Survey estimates
This elderly woman was rescued after spending nearly 72 hours trapped under debris from a collapsed building in the aftermath of Venezuela's deadly earthquakes. That's according to Spain's military emergency unit, which released this video on Saturday. She was carried out to waiting ambulances as onlookers applauded. Scenes like this are playing out across La Guaira, Venezuela's main coastal state, and one of the hardest hit regions after the twin earthquakes struck on Wednesday. Families, volunteers, and international rescue crews are racing to find more of the missing. Officials said more than 16,000 foreign rescuers had arrived and that additional teams were on the way. However, the overall response has been uneven, with heavy machinery scarce and some residents digging by hand through collapsed buildings in search of missing relatives. The scale of the disaster is still unclear. Venezuela's top lawmaker, Jorge Rodriguez, says the death toll has reached more than 1,400 people. Officials warn those numbers are expected to rise, and Rodriguez says scores of people are still missing. However, a website run by the country's opposition claims that more than 55,000 people are listed as unaccounted for. The U.S. Geological Survey has warned that more than 10,000 deaths are possible from the magnitude 7.2 and 7.5 quakes. That would rank them among the deadliest in Latin America in the last century.